And then it happened. A pain so sharp, so unbearable, that she thought she was going to unalive. Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't scream. She felt as if her voice had left her. When it was over, she curled up on the mattress, shaking. She could feel the burning pain between her legs and she wanted to disappear. Her father sat on the stool, his head in his hands. He didn't say anything. Justina turned to the wall, silent tears soaking her pillow. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to run away, but where would she go? Justina was just 5 years old when her mother left her with her father as a result of poverty. The bakery where her father worked provided them with a tiny apartment at the back of the building. It was nothing fancy, just a single room with a mattress on the floor. But for Justina, it was home. Her father, Daniel, worked long hours in the bakery. He would wake up before dawn, mix flour, knead dough, and sweat in the heat of the ovens until late at night. Justina was a quiet child. She had learned to keep herself busy while her father was at work. During the day, she would sit outside the bakery, watching people come and go. She loved to see the school children in their uniforms, laughing and chattering as they passed by. She wished she could go to school too, but there was no money for that. Instead, she spent her days helping an elderly woman named Mama Grace, who sold roasted plantains by the roadside. In exchange, Mama Grace would give her some food and tell her stories about the past. Daniel loved his daughter, but life was hard. He often looked at Justina and felt guilty for the kind of life he was giving her. He wished he could do more. He wished he could send her to school, buy her nice clothes, or even give her 3 proper meals a day. But all he could afford was the dry bread from the bakery and, on lucky days, a little ground nut paste to go with it. One evening, as they sat outside their small room, Justina looked up at her father and asked, "Papa, when will I go to school?" Daniel sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. "Soon, my child," he said, forcing a smile. "Very soon." But Justina was not convinced. She had asked this question many times before, and the answer was always the same. That night, after eating their usual meal of bread and butter, Justina lay down on the mattress while her father sat on the wooden stool, staring into space. He had a lot on his mind. He knew he couldn't keep promising Justina things he might never be able to give her. As he watched his daughter sleep, he felt a deep sadness in his heart. He reached out and gently brushed her hair from her face. She was all he had left, and he was determined to protect her no matter what. One night, Justina yawned and rubbed her eyes. "I'm sleepy, Papa." "Then go to bed, my dear. I'll join you soon." She lay down on the mattress and pulled the thin wrapper over herself. Within minutes, she was fast asleep. Daniel sat for a long time, thinking about his life. He had heard that a new construction company was hiring laborers. The pay was better than what he earned at the bakery. If he got the job, he could start saving for Justina's school fees. With this thought in mind, he lay down beside Justina and drifted into a deep sleep. The night was quiet, except for the occasional sound of rats scurrying across the wooden floor. Justina stirred in her sleep. She had been dreaming about school, about wearing a blue uniform and carrying a big school bag. In her dream, she was laughing and playing with other children, but suddenly, the dream changed. She felt something cold touch her back. Her eyes fluttered open, but the room was dark. She lay still, listening. Then she felt it again. A hand, rough and unfamiliar, moving slowly along her back. A wave of fear rushed through her body. She tried to move, but the hand pressed down on her. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped in her chest. Who was in the room with them? Where was her father? The hand moved lower, and that was when she knew. This was not a dream. Justina lay still, gripping the mattress tightly as her father's hand moved across her back. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew something didn't feel right. She squeezed her eyes shut, pretend to be asleep. Maybe if she didn't move, he would stop. Maybe if she stayed quiet, it would all go away. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt her breath come in short, quick gasps. She wanted to turn around, to look at her father's face, but she was too scared. Eventually, the touch stopped, and she heard him shift beside her. She waited, her body tense, until she was sure he was asleep, before she let out a silent sigh of relief. The next morning, Justina woke up feeling strange. She wasn't sure how to explain it, but something had changed. She watched her father as he prepared for work, moving around the small room as if nothing had happened. She wanted to believe that maybe she had imagined it all. "Justina," he called softly. "Yes, Papa," she replied, sitting up on the mattress. "Are you okay?" His eyes studied her face as he buttoned his shirt. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Papa, I'm fine." He smiled at her, the same warm smile he always gave, but something about it felt different. Or maybe she was the one who had changed. That day, Justina went to Mama Grace's roadside stand as usual. She sat quietly, helping the old woman wrap roasted plantains in banana leaves. Mama Grace noticed her silence. "My child, are you all right?" she asked. Justina forced a small smile. "I'm fine, Mama Grace." But she wasn't fine. That night, after her father returned from work, he sat on the wooden stool and watched Justina as she tidied up their small room. "Come, sit on my lap," he said suddenly. Justina, frozen. She had always sat on his lap before. He would tell her stories, make her laugh, and call her his little princess. But now, something about it felt different. She hesitated for a moment, but when she saw the look in his eyes, she forced herself to move toward him. She climbed onto his lap, and almost immediately she felt something beneath her shift. It was something she had never noticed before, a strange, hard thing pressing against her. She swallowed hard. Her father wrapped his arms around her tightly. "You know I love you, right?" he murmured against her ear. Justina nodded, but she felt cold all over. "Good girl," he whispered. From that day on, it became routine. Every night, after returning from the bakery, her father would call her to sit on his lap. At first, she thought it was just a normal hug, but then she began to notice the changes. The way he would hold her a little too tightly, the way his hands would move in ways that made her uncomfortable. She never said anything. She couldn't. He was her father, the only person she had in the world. If she told anyone, who would believe her? Where would she go? She loved her father. She really did. He was the one who cared for her when her mother left. He was the one who worked so hard to feed her. He was the one who wiped her tears when she was sad. But now, everything felt different. Then, one evening, something happened that changed everything. Justina had just finished fetching water from the public tap. She was sweating from the long walk back and decided to take a quick bath before dinner. Their small apartment had a tiny bathroom with a wooden door that didn't lock properly. She undressed quickly, poured water into a small bucket, and began to bathe. She had just poured water over her head when the door creaked open. She turned sharply, covering her chest with her small hands. Her father stood there, looking at her. "Papa," she whispered, her voice shaking. He didn't say anything at first. Then, in a calm voice, he said, "Come out." Justina hesitated. She didn't understand what was happening, but something in her told her not to argue. She slowly stepped out of the bathroom, shivering as water dripped down her skin. Her father pointed to the floor. "Pick that up for me." She looked down. A small rag lay at his feet. She bent down to pick it up, and that was when she felt it. A strong grip around her waist. She gasped as her father's hands locked around her small frame. Before she could even react, he pulled her toward him. Her mind went blank. She struggled, but he was too strong. And then, it happened. A pain so sharp, so unbearable, that she thought she was going to unalive. Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't scream. She felt as if her voice had left her. When it was over, she curled up on the mattress, shaking. She could feel the burning pain between her legs and she wanted to disappear. Her father sat on the stool, his head in his hands. He didn't say anything. Justina turned to the wall, silent tears soaking her pillow. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to run away, but where would she go? The next morning, Justina felt sore all over. She moved slowly, her body aching in ways she had never felt before. She was supposed to go to school that day. Her father had finally managed to enroll her a few months ago. At school, she sat quietly in class, barely listening to the teacher's words. The other children laughed and played, but she felt numb. During break time, her teacher, Miss Evelyn, called her aside. "Justina," she said gently, kneeling to look her in the eyes. "Are you okay?" Justina forced a smile. "Yes, Ma." Miss Evelyn studied her face for a moment, then sighed. "If anything is wrong, you can always talk to me, okay?" Justina nodded. "Okay, Ma." But she knew she couldn't tell her. She had no one to talk to, except for her father. Of course, the very person who was doing this to her. Justina had grown used to silence. Over the years, she had learnt to bury her pain, to hide the things that happened behind the closed doors of their small apartment. She no longer fought, no longer resisted. It had become normal. Something that just happened, and so she learned to live with it. By the time she turned 14, she had changed. She was no longer the bright-eyed little girl who loved listening to Mama Grace's folk tales. She had grown quiet, withdrawn. She focused on her studies, knowing that education was the only thing that could take her far from her current life. Her father still worked at the bakery, still came home late at night, and still called her to his bed whenever he pleased. She no longer cried. She no longer begged. She just obeyed. But then, something changed. One morning, while sitting in class, Justina felt an unusual wave of nausea rise in her stomach. She tried to ignore it, but before she could stop herself, she leaned forward and vomited all over the floor. The classroom erupted in noise as the other students jumped back in shock. Her teacher, Miss Evelyn, rushed over to her. "Are you okay?" Justina wiped her mouth, feeling lightheaded. "I'm fine, Ma," she whispered, trying to steady herself. Miss Evelyn wasn't convinced. She took one look at Justina's pale face and shook her head. "No, you're not fine. You look weak. You've been looking sick for weeks now, and just tired," Justina said quickly. "No," Miss Evelyn's voice was firm. "You're going to the school clinic, right now." Before Justina could protest, she was led out of the classroom. The nurse at the school hospital made her lie down and asked her a few questions before deciding to run some tests. Justina waited anxiously, her fingers gripping the edge of the bed. She didn't like doctors. She didn't like checkups. After what felt like hours, the nurse returned with a concerned expression. Miss Evelyn stood beside her, arms crossed. "Justina," the nurse began slowly, "you're pregnant." Justina blinked. "What?" "You're pregnant," the nurse repeated. Miss Evelyn gasped. "How?" "Justina, you're only 14. Who is responsible for this?" "I don't know," Justina muttered, looking down at her lap. "What do you mean you don't know?" Miss Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Has someone been touching you? Justina, you have to tell us the truth." Justina shook her head quickly. "Nobody. I don't know anything." The nurse and Miss Evelyn exchanged worried glances. "We need to call your father," the nurse said finally. Justina's heart pounded. "No," she whispered. But it was too late. Her father arrived at the school an hour later, his face a mask of anger. "What is this nonsense?" he barked as soon as he stepped into the principal's office. "What is this I'm hearing about my daughter?" "Mr. Gabriel, your daughter is pregnant," the principal said, watching him closely. "We need to know who is responsible." Justina sat on a chair, her head down. She could feel her father's eyes burning into her. "It's Dina," he snapped. "Who did this to you?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know." His hand slammed against the desk. "Don't lie to me, Justina. Who have you been messing around with?" Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head. "Nobody, Papa, I swear." Her father turned to the principal, shaking his head in frustration. "I don't know what's wrong with this girl, but don't worry, I will handle this. She will confess when we get home." The teachers exchanged concerned looks, but they didn't stop him as he grabbed Justina's wrist and led her out of the office. The door slammed shut behind them as soon as they got home. Justina barely had time to breathe before her father grabbed her shoulders and shook her. "How did this happen?" he shouted. "Who else have you been with?" She trembled. "Nobody, Papa. You're the only one." He froze. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, he let go of her and took a step back. "Why didn't you say anything at the school?" he asked, his voice suddenly calm. "I didn't want to implicate you," she whispered. He exhaled deeply, rubbing his forehead. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Nobody must ever know about this. Do you hear me?" Justina nodded quickly. "This pregnancy must go," he continued. "You are too young for this. We will take care of it, and you will go back to school as if nothing happened." She didn't respond. That evening, her father left the house and returned with some pills. "Take these," he ordered. Justina stared at the small white tablets in his palm. She didn't know much about pregnancy, but she knew what these pills were meant for. Slowly, she took them from his hand and swallowed them. Over the next few days, she bled heavily. The pain was unbearable, but she didn't complain. She stayed curled up on the mattress, biting her lips to stop herself from crying out. Her father barely looked at her. He simply told her to stay home until it was over. And then, just like that, it was gone. A week later, Justina returned to school. Miss Evelyn watched her carefully. "Are you feeling better?" "Yes, Ma," Justina replied, forcing a smile. Miss Evelyn narrowed her eyes. Something about Justina seemed off. The sickly look was gone. The exhaustion in her eyes had disappeared. She turned to the principal later that day. "Something isn't right," she said. "Justina was pregnant last week, but now? She looks like she never was." The principal sighed. Her father said it was a family matter, and it has been handled. Miss Evelyn frowned. "That doesn't sit right with me." "But what can we do?" the principal asked. "She won't talk, and if her father says it has been handled, we have no proof of anything." Miss Evelyn pursed her lips. She didn't know what it was, but something inside her told her that Justina needed help. She just didn't know how to give it. Then it happened again. Mrs. Evelyn wasn't convinced. Something about the entire situation didn't make sense. How could Justina get pregnant twice, and then suddenly both pregnancies disappeared? It wasn't normal. One afternoon, she sat at her desk, lost in thought. Justina was a quiet girl. She had always been that way. But there was something else, a fear in her eyes, a reluctance to speak. Miss Evelyn knew that if she wanted answers, she needed to gain Justina's trust. So, she changed her approach. Instead of pressuring Justina with questions, she started being kinder to her. She praised her in class, bought her snacks, and gave her small gifts. One day, she invited Justina to her home. "I made jollof rice," Miss Evelyn said with a smile. "Come and eat with me." Justina hesitated, but eventually agreed. When they got to Miss Evelyn's house, the teacher made sure to make Justina feel comfortable. She gave her juice, made her laugh, and spoke to her gently. "You're Sinna. I care about you," Mrs. Evelyn said softly. "You can tell me anything, and I won't be mad." Justina stared at her plate, her fingers playing with the spoon. Miss Evelyn reached out and placed a comforting hand over hers. "Please, talk to me. Who's been getting you pregnant?" Tears welled up in Justina's eyes. She swallowed hard, struggling to speak. Miss Evelyn waited patiently. "Finally," Justina whispered. "It's my father." Miss Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "What?" Justina sniffed, wiping her eyes. "He's the only man I've ever been with." Miss Evelyn felt sick. "Oh, Justina, I didn't say anything before because I love him." Justina continued in a small voice. "I don't want anyone to hurt him." Miss Evelyn's heart broke at those words. This poor girl had been manipulated so badly that she thought what was happening to her was love. She reached for Justina's hands and squeezed them gently. "Justina, listen to me. What your father has been doing is wrong. He has been hurting you." Justina shook her head quickly. "No, he loves me. He takes care of me. He says I belong to him." Miss Evelyn inhaled deeply, struggling to stay calm. "That is not love, Justina. A father is supposed to protect his daughter, not hurt her. He has lied to you." Justina's lips trembled. "But if I tell anyone, they will take him away." Miss Evelyn took a deep breath and made a difficult decision. She couldn't let this continue. The next morning, Miss Evelyn went straight to the police station. She sat before an officer and took a deep breath. "I need to report a case of child abuse," she said. When they asked for details, she told them everything Justina had confessed to her. The officers took the report seriously. Within hours, a group of policemen arrived at Justina's home. Her father was inside eating dinner when they knocked on the door. "Mr. Gabriel, you are under arrest for child abuse and assault," the officer announced. Gabriel's eyes widened in shock. "What? This is nonsense. Who said such a thing?" The officer didn't respond. They handcuffed him and dragged him outside as neighbors peeked from their windows. Justina, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, watched in horror as her father was taken away. "No," she cried, running after him. "Papa, please, don't take him away." Gabriel turned to her with anger in his eyes. "You told them? You betrayed me?" Justina sobbed. "I didn't mean to. Take him away," the officer ordered. As they shoved him into the police van, Justina fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. Miss Evelyn rushed to her side and held her tightly. "It's over, Justina," she whispered. "You are safe now." But Justina didn't feel safe. She felt broken. Her father, the only person she had ever known, was gone. She didn't know what came next, and that terrified her the most. Justina sat in the small therapy room, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. The walls were painted a soft blue, and the air smelled like lavender. Across from her sat a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. The therapist said softly, "I know this is hard, but you're safe now." Justina lowered her head. "I don't feel safe," she whispered. The therapist leaned forward. "Why?" Tears welled up in Justina's eyes. "Because my father is gone. I don't know how to live without him." The therapist nodded, her face filled with understanding. "I know it feels that way, but Justina, what your father did to you was wrong." Justina wiped her eyes quickly. "But he loved me. He took care of me. He said I belonged to him." The therapist sighed gently. "That's not love, Justina. A father's love is supposed to protect, not harm. He made you believe something that isn't true." Justina stared at her hands. "But I still miss him." "It's okay to miss him," the therapist said. "You loved him because he was your father, but the love he showed you wasn't real love. He was supposed to be your protector, not someone who hurt you." Justina took a shaky breath. "So, what I felt for him wasn't real love," the therapist nodded. "No, Justina, it was manipulation. He made you think you had no choice, but you did, and now you are free." Justina was quiet for a long time. The words sank into her heart, heavy but true. Over the next few months, she continued therapy, slowly unlearning the lies her father had told her. She began to see that love wasn't supposed to be painful or secretive. She learned to forgive herself for believing him and started to heal. Meanwhile, her father was sentenced to prison. The court found him guilty of multiple offenses and he was given a long sentence. When Justina heard the news, she felt a mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, and fear of the unknown. But for the first time in her life, she also felt something else. She was free. And for the first time, she could finally begin to live. After watching this video, would you leave your girl child with her father after a messy breakup? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment, and share. What would you do if your husband decided to divorce you after winning $7 million because you nagged him for 2 years to get a real job? It was a bright morning in the small neighborhood where David and Ruth lived with their 2 children. The sun peeked through the old, faded curtains of their tiny apartment, casting a soft glow on the worn-out furniture. The place wasn't much, but it was home, and they had built a life together in it. David had once been a proud man, a university graduate who had worked as an accountant in a reputable firm. But that was years ago. He had lost his job due to downsizing, and since then, things had never been the same. At first, he tried looking for another job, sending out applications and attending interviews, but nothing worked out. As the months passed, his efforts slowed down, and he began spending more time at home, convinced that a man of his status shouldn't take just any job. Ruth, on the other hand, had no such pride. She had always been hard-working, determined to keep her family afloat. She worked as a cashier at a supermarket during the day and cleaned offices at night. It was exhausting, but she did it because there was no other choice. That morning, as she rushed to get ready for work, she glanced at David, who was seated on the couch, flipping through an old newspaper. He had been sitting in the same spot for hours, just like he did every day. "David," she called gently as she adjusted her uniform. "Have you tried looking for anything today?" David sighed, not taking his eyes off the newspaper. "Ruth, I keep telling you, I can't just take any job. I have a degree. I have standards." Ruth paused, pressing her lips together. She had heard this countless times before. "David, we don't have time for standards," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The bills don't care about your degree. The children need food, rent is due, and I can't do this alone forever." David folded the newspaper and leaned back against the couch. "You're acting like I don't want to work. I just haven't found the right opportunity yet." "The right opportunity?" Ruth let out a humorless laugh. "David, it's been 2 years. 2 years, and you've not found one single opportunity that fits your standards?" David frowned. "Why are you making it sound like I'm lazy?" "Because you are," Ruth snapped before taking a deep breath. She didn't want to argue. She was too tired for that. "David, please, just take something. Anything, even if it's temporary. Just help me." Davy didn't respond. He only shook his head, picked up the remote, and turned on the television. Ruth swallowed the lump in her throat. "I have to go," she muttered, grabbing her bag. She kissed their 2 children on their foreheads before stepping out. The moment she closed the door, she let out a deep breath, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. As Ruth walked down the street to catch a bus, her mind was filled with frustration and sadness. She loved David, but love alone couldn't put food on the table. The long hours at work drained her, but she had no choice. She worked hard, sometimes pulling double shifts, sometimes skipping meals so that their children could eat. But what hurt her most wasn't the exhaustion. It was the fact that the man she married, the man she once admired, had given up on trying. That evening, when Ruth returned home, her body ached all over. She was exhausted from standing on her feet all day, and her second job awaited her in just a few hours. As she entered the house, the sight before her made her heart sink. David was exactly where she had left him, this time with the television on, watching a football match. "You're back," he said casually without looking away from the screen. Ruth dropped her bag and stared at him. "David, did you step out today? Did you check for jobs?" David sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ruth, not this again." "Yes, this again," she fired back. "David, I need you to do something. Anything. Even if it's just for now." He turned to her, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. I worked hard to get my degree. I can't just throw that away and take any random job." "Random job?" Ruth scoffed, shaking her head. "David, I know a man with a degree who is driving a taxi just to put food on the table. I know another who works as a security guard at night and teaches part-time during the day. Do you think they don't have standards? But they have families to feed, and they are doing what they must." David clenched his jaw. "I'm not them. I will not lower myself like that." Ruth felt something inside her snap. "Lower yourself? Is that what you think I do? Lowering myself just so you and the kids can eat?" David looked away, guilt flashing across his face for a brief moment. "That's not what I meant." "But that's what you said," Ruth whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Silence stretched between them. David didn't have a response. He never did. Ruth sighed and turned away. "I'm going to change. I have another shift in an hour." As the days passed, nothing changed. David remained in the house, waiting for the right opportunity, while Ruth carried the weight of their family on her shoulders. One evening, after another long day, she returned home and found their landlord, Mr. Okafor, standing by the entrance of their building. "Ah, Ruth, welcome," he greeted, his voice serious. Her stomach tightened. "Good evening, sir. I need to talk to you about the rent," he said, glancing at her tired face. She swallowed hard. "Sir, please, just a little more time." Mr. Okafor sighed. "Ruth, I understand. You work hard, "But it's been 3 months. I can't keep waiting." Tears burned in her eyes. "I promise. I'll pay. Just give me more time." He hesitated before nodding. "All right. End of the month. No more excuses." As he walked away, Ruth felt her knees go weak. She turned and entered the house, her mind racing. David was on the couch, as usual. "David?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, unaware of the storm inside her. She stepped closer, her hands trembling. "The landlord gave us until the end of the month. If we don't pay, we're out." David's expression darkened. "He can't just kick us out." "David, stop," Ruth shouted, surprising even herself. "Stop acting like everything is fine. It's not. I am drowning, and you're just sitting there watching." David was silent. Ruth wiped her eyes. "If you love us, if you care about this family, prove it. Stand up and do something." Then, without another word, she angrily walked to the bedroom and shut the door, leaving David alone with his thoughts. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Ruth continued pushing herself beyond her limits, making sure her children had food to eat, a roof over their heads and clothes on their backs. She didn't care about herself anymore. There was no time for that. All that mattered was keeping her family afloat, even if it meant sacrificing her own well-being. She barely had time to sleep. Every morning she left before sunrise and returned late at night. The little energy she had left was spent making sure the house was in order, ensuring the children were bathed, their homework was done, and their school fees were somehow managed. And David, he remained the same. He had gotten too comfortable being cared for, acting as if life owed him an opportunity on a silver platter. He wasn't worried about bills or responsibilities because Ruth was handling it all. She tried to be the good wife, the supportive wife. She forced herself to believe that things would change, that one day David would wake up and realize what she had been going through. But each time she hoped, he disappointed her. Sometimes, when she stood in front of the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The vibrant, beautiful woman she once was had faded. Her skin had lost its glow, dark circles formed under her tired eyes, and her body had become heavier, worn down by stress and exhaustion. One evening, after a long, grueling day at work, she had just entered the house, her feet dragging across the floor, when David, as usual, was seated comfortably on the couch, watching television. He barely acknowledged her arrival. "David!" she called, dropping her bag on the chair. He hummed in response, not looking away from the screen. She sighed, pressing her fingers against her temple. "Do you even notice me anymore?" David finally turned to her, his eyes scanning her appearance. His lips curled in mild amusement. "You've really let yourself go, Ruth. You're getting fat." Ruth felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she swallowed it down. "I had children, David. I work day and night to make sure this family survives. What do you expect?" David shrugged. "I'm just saying. You used to look better." Ruth clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to stay calm. She had wanted to talk about his job situation, to beg him one more time to make an effort, but what was the point? He didn't care, so she said nothing. She turned and entered the bedroom, feeling a deep sadness settle in her chest. The weeks dragged on, and Ruth continued to push through, even when her body begged her to slow down. Then one day, everything came crashing down. She had been feeling weak for a while, but she ignored it, convincing herself that she just needed more sleep. But sleep never came. There was always something to do, someone to take care of. One afternoon, while at work, her vision blurred and her legs gave out beneath her. The next thing she knew, she was on the floor, surrounded by concerned co-workers. Someone called an ambulance, and before she could protest, she was being rushed to the hospital. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on a hospital bed, an IV drip attached to her arm. A doctor stood beside her, concern etched on his face. "Ruth, you collapsed from exhaustion. Your body is shutting down because you're overworking yourself. You need rest." Ruth shook her head, panic rising in her chest. "No, doctor, I can't stay here. I have to go home. I have to work. Who will take care of my children?" The doctor sighed. "If you don't rest, you might not be able to take care of them at all. Your body needs to recover." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Doctor, I don't have anyone to cover the bills. Please, just let me go home." The doctor hesitated, but eventually gave in to her pleas. He prescribed some medication and warned her to take care of herself. Later that evening, Ruth dragged herself back home. She was still weak, her head pounding, but she had no choice. As she stepped into the house, her heart sank. David was in his usual spot, relaxed in front of the television. He turned his head slightly when he saw her. "You're back early. What happened?" Ruth stared at him in disbelief. "David, I was in the hospital," she said, her voice shaking. David frowned. "Hospital? What happened?" "I collapsed," she muttered, from exhaustion. David clicked his tongue and turned back to the television. "You see? That's your problem, Ruth. You work too much." Ruth felt her knees go weak. She had expected worry, even a little guilt. But instead she got indifference. Her heart pounded as she walked toward him. "David, why are you like this? Why don't you care? Why do you feel so comfortable sitting here every day while I kill myself just to make sure we survive?" David sighed, looking at her as if she were disturbing him. "Nobody asked you to overwork yourself, Ruth. That's on you." The words hit her like a slap. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of the chair for support. "David, if I don't do it, who will?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. David didn't answer. Ruth let out a bitter laugh. "I'm tired. I'm tired of doing everything. I'm tired of carrying this family alone. I am tired." David's face darkened. He didn't like being challenged, and Ruth's sudden outburst made him uncomfortable. Without another word, he stood up and stormed out of the house. Ruth sat on the couch, burying her face in her hands. She had nothing left to give. That night, David didn't come home until late. When he did, Ruth noticed something strange. He was holding a small ticket in his hand, his eyes filled with an unusual excitement. "What's that?" she asked, exhaustion laced in her voice. David grinned. "Lottery ticket." Ruth blinked. "Lottery? Yes," he said, his excitement growing. "This could be our big break, Ruth. People win millions from this. If I win, we'll never have to struggle again." Ruth felt a deep ache in her chest. "David, you think gambling is the solution?" David ignored her. From that night on, he became obsessed. Every little money he got his hands on, he spent on lottery tickets, convinced that one day he would win big. He stopped looking for jobs entirely, convinced that his luck was just around the corner. Meanwhile, Ruth continued to struggle, watching helplessly as her husband sank deeper into his delusions. And for the first time in her life, she began to wonder if love alone was enough to hold a marriage together. David became completely consumed by his obsession with the lottery. Every morning he woke up with one goal in mind: to check the latest lottery results. Every penny he could gather, he spent on more tickets. He was convinced that one day luck would shine on him, and he would become a millionaire overnight. Ruth noticed how much money he was spending on the lottery and became deeply worried. Their finances were already stretched thin, and now David was using what little they had to chase a dream that might never come true. One evening, after coming home from her exhausting double shifts, she sat beside him and spoke gently. "David, you need to stop this. This lottery is not a job. You need to get real work." David sighed and shook his head. "Ruth, you don't understand. People win millions from this. One lucky ticket and we'll be rich. Just wait and see." "But what if that day never comes?" Ruth asked, her voice breaking. "We can't keep living like this. I can't do everything alone, David." David waved her off, uninterested in her words. "You worry too much, Ruth. Just trust me." Ruth wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She simply sighed and went to bed, praying that one day David would change. But he didn't. Instead, his obsession grew. He started selling household items just to buy more lottery tickets. If Ruth left money on the table for food, David would take it and rush off to play the lottery. The children barely saw their father anymore. When they did, he was always staring at numbers, calculating, hoping. Then, one fateful evening, luck finally smiled on him. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, his hands shaking. The numbers matched. His numbers. His heart pounded. His breath came in short, rapid gasps. He jumped up, knocking over the chair, his entire body trembling with excitement. It felt unreal, like a dream. He had just won $7 million. He could barely contain himself as he rushed home, eager to announce the news. When he got to the house, Ruth had just returned from work. She sat on the bed, her feet swollen from standing all day, while the children were in their room doing homework. She didn't even have the strength to prepare dinner yet. David burst through the door, his face beaming with excitement. "I won!" he shouted. "I won $7 million. I told you! I told you!" Ruth shot up from the bed, her exhaustion forgotten. Thank God," she cried, rushing to him. We won! David suddenly took a step back, his face twisting in confusion. "What do you mean, we?" Ruth blinked, her hands still mid-air from where she had been about to hug him. "David, of course, it's our win. We are a family." David laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was bitter, mocking. He shook his head. No, Ruth. This is my money, not ours." Ruth's heart skipped a beat. "David, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said coldly, "that you will be hearing from my lawyer soon." Ruth's mouth went dry. "Lawyer? David, you're joking, right?" David's expression hardened. "No, Ruth, I was only with you because I was broke, but now I can finally live the life I deserve. Do you think I ever wanted this life? Do you think I wanted a woman like you?" Ruth felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. "A woman like me?" she whispered. David scoffed. "Yes, you. You're fat, stressed, always complaining. Look at you. Do you think a man with $7 million wants a woman like you?" Ruth's hands trembled. "David, after everything I did for you?" David rolled his eyes. "Please, spare me the speech. The truth is, I was managing you. You were never my type. I love women with BBLs, women with hot bodies, women who take care of themselves, not a tired, old-looking woman like you." Tears streamed down Ruth's face as she staggered back. The children ran into the room, frightened by the shouting. "Please, Daddy," their daughter cried. "Don't leave us." David didn't even glance at her. Instead, he pulled out a $100 bill from his pocket and tossed it on the bed. "This should be enough for you and the kids. I'm out of here." With that, he walked out of their lives. David's new life was everything he had ever dreamed of. He moved to a high-end apartment on the island, leaving behind the small neighborhood that had been his home for years. He bought expensive designer clothes, flashy luxury cars, and started living in 5-star hotels. Women flocked to him. Beautiful women, glamorous women. They called him Big Daddy, showered him with attention, and made him feel like a king. He threw money around carelessly, hosting extravagant parties, drinking the most expensive wine, and traveling to exotic locations. He felt untouchable, but the money did not last forever. Within a year, the millions began to disappear. The fake friends who surrounded him only stayed as long as his pockets were full. The women he had spent lavishly on moved on to richer men. One day, he checked his bank account and felt his heart drop. Only a few $100 remained. Panic set in. He had no investments, no savings. He had wasted everything on a lifestyle that was never built to last. With nowhere else to turn, he decided to go back to Ruth. Surely she would take him back. After all, she had always been there for him. She had loved him when he had nothing. She would understand. With his last money, he took a taxi back to the old neighborhood. But as he stepped out of the car, he noticed something different. The house he had once lived in looked new, renovated. There was a nice car parked outside. The children's laughter filled the air. David's heart pounded as he knocked on the door. A few moments later, Ruth opened it. She looked different, healthy, radiant, happy. And beside her stood another man. A strong, confident-looking man who had his arm around her waist. David's throat went dry. "Ruth." Ruth stared at him for a long moment. Then she simply smiled. "Oh, David, you're back." David swallowed hard. "Ruth, please. I made a mistake. I lost everything. Please, take me back for the kids." Ruth shook her head, her expression calm. "David, I begged you. I pleaded with you not to leave. You abandoned us. Now it's too late." David turned to his children. "Kids, it's Daddy." But they barely looked at him. They had grown used to life without him. Tears welled in his eyes. "Please, Ruth, give me another chance." Ruth's new husband stepped forward. "I think you should leave, David." David's shoulders slumped. He turned away, his heart filled with regret. As he walked away, he realized the painful truth. He had once had a family who loved him, but he threw it all away for temporary pleasures. And now, he had lost everything. Kemi grew up in a small, quiet village. Her parents, though hard-working, were poor farmers who struggled to make ends meet. Kemi, their only daughter, helped them on the farm every day, rising before dawn to till the land and returning home late in the evening. Life was hard, but Kemi endured it with silent resilience. One fateful evening, as Kemi was walking back home from the farm alone, the unthinkable happened. A group of men ambushed her in the bush. They overpowered her, ignoring her screams and pleas for mercy, and had their way with her. When they were done, they left her bruised and broken. Kemi stumbled home, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling with pain and fear. When she told her parents what had happened, she expected them to comfort her, to hold her and tell her it wasn't her fault. Instead, they were furious. Her father shouted, calling her a disgrace to their family. Her mother slapped her repeatedly, accusing her of bringing shame to their name. Kemi was too stunned to speak. Through her tears, she tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. That night, she cried herself to sleep, her heart heavy with pain and rejection. The days that followed were no better. Kemi returned to the farm, carrying the weight of her trauma alone. She kept her head down and worked, trying to bury the pain deep within her. But a few weeks later, she began to feel strange. She was constantly tired, felt nauseous, and her stomach began to swell slightly. Deep down, Kemi feared the worst. Her fears were confirmed when a village herbalist examined her and announced that she was pregnant. When her parents found out, their anger erupted like a storm. Her father's voice boomed through the house as he berated her, calling her all sorts of names. Her mother joined in, pulling at her hair and slapping her face. "You are a curse to this family," her mother shouted. "You've brought nothing but shame." Their words pierced her heart like daggers, but the worst was yet to come. That same evening, they packed her few belongings in a small bag and threw it out of the house. "Leave!" her father barked. "You are no longer our daughter. You have disgraced us enough." With nowhere to go, Kemi wandered the streets of the village, her swollen belly a mark of shame that everyone pointed at. Whispers and mocking laughter followed her wherever she went. Children teased her, and women clucked their tongues in disapproval. The humiliation was unbearable. One night, as she sat by the village stream, she made up her mind. She could no longer stay in the village. She had to leave and start a new life elsewhere. With the little money she had saved from selling farm produce, Kemi made her way to the city. The bustling streets were overwhelming, filled with noise and chaos unlike anything she had known. Kemi quickly realized that surviving in the city was not going to be easy. She applied for jobs, but without any formal education or skills, no one was willing to hire her. Rejections piled up, and her hope dwindled. Desperate to survive, Kemi began doing menial jobs. She carried heavy loads for market women, fetched water for busy households, and washed clothes for strangers. The work was back-breaking, but it allowed her to afford a small one-room house in a rundown part of the city. When her baby arrived, a beautiful boy with her wide eyes and soft brown skin, Kemi felt a surge of love and determination. She named him David, a symbol of her hope and strength. But life became even harder. With her baby strapped to her back, Kemi continued her menial jobs. Under the scorching sun and pouring rain, she worked tirelessly, balancing her child's needs and the demands of her job. Every night, as she lay on the thin mat in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling, Kemi wondered if her life would ever get better, but she refused to give up. She was determined to create a better future for herself and her son, no matter how long it took. Years passed, and Kemi continued to work tirelessly to provide for her son, David. He was growing fast, a bright and curious child who brought light into her otherwise challenging life. Despite her struggles, Kemi made sure David never lacked the basics, even though luxuries were beyond their reach. She loved him deeply and wanted the best for him. As David grew older, Kemi began to consider opening her heart to love again. She felt lonely at times and wondered if she could find someone who would accept her and her son. She started meeting men, cautiously at first, but every relationship seemed to end the same way. Once they discovered she was a single mother, they pulled away. "I can't marry a woman with a child," one of them said bluntly, before leaving her in tears. Each rejection stung, but Kemi held her head high, refusing to let the world see her break. She told herself that she didn't need a man to validate her worth. Determined to give David a better future, Kemi doubled her hustle. She took on more work, carrying heavier loads and accepting more washing jobs. She slept less and worked more, her hands often blistered and sore. Slowly but surely, she began to save a small amount of money. It wasn't much, but it gave her hope. That day, she made a vow. No more distractions, no more trusting the wrong people. Her focus would be on David and herself. True to her word, Kemi threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She had almost resigned herself to a life of endless toil when a kind woman named Auntie Grace approached her. Auntie Grace was a successful businesswoman who sold fabrics in the bustling city market. She had watched Kemi work tirelessly for years and admired her resilience. "Kemi, you're hardworking and honest," Auntie Grace said one afternoon. "Why don't you try starting a small business? I can guide you." Kemi hesitated, unsure if she could take such a leap, but Auntie Grace's encouragement gave her the confidence to try. With the little money she managed to save again, she bought a few yards of fabric and began selling them in the market. At first it was slow, but Kemi was patient. She treated every customer with respect, and soon word spread about her honesty and affordable prices. Her business began to grow. She expanded her stock, selling clothes and accessories alongside fabrics. For the first time in years, Kemi saw hope for a better life. With the profits from her business, Kemi was able to move to a better neighborhood. She sent David to a good school where his brilliance began to shine. He excelled in all his subjects, impressing his teachers and making his mother proud. One day, David came home with exciting news. He had secured a scholarship to a prestigious university. Kemi was overwhelmed with pride and gratitude. All her sacrifices, all the sleepless nights and long days were finally paying off. As David pursued his studies, Kemi's business continued to thrive. She opened a small shop in the market, hired assistants, and became a respected figure in the community. David's success only added to her joy. After graduating, he secured a high-paying job in the oil and gas industry. Years later, David was not just successful, he was wealthy and influential. He bought his mother a beautiful home and made sure she never had to work again. Kemi, once the poor girl mocked by her village, now lived a life of comfort and pride, all thanks to her perseverance and David's hard work. One day, Kemi decided to surprise her son with a visit to his office. She dressed in her best attire and carried a small gift for him. As she walked into the grand building where he worked, she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Kemi had no idea that the visit to her son's office would change everything. She had dressed modestly, carrying a small package for David. She wanted to surprise him and see how far he had come in his career. It was something she was immensely proud of. Her boy, who had grown from nothing into a man of great success. As she approached the elevator, Kemi's heel caught on the edge of a rug. She stumbled forward and stepped on someone's foot. It was a young, elegant woman holding a designer handbag and scrolling through her phone. The woman immediately turned to her with a sharp glare. "What's wrong with you? Are you blind?" she snapped, her tone laced with anger. Kemi quickly apologized, her voice trembling. "Oh, I'm so sorry, my dear. I didn't see you. I tripped." But the young lady wasn't having it. "Sorry? That's all you have to say? You should watch where you're going. People like you have no business in places like this. Kemi felt a pang of humiliation, but tried to stay calm. I didn't mean to upset you. Please forgive me. The lady scoffed and walked into the elevator without another word, leaving Kemi standing there, shaken. When Kemi finally made it to David's office, she pushed the incident out of her mind. Her son welcomed her warmly, and they spent the next hour talking and laughing. She didn't mention what had happened, not wanting to ruin the moment. Later that evening, as she sat in her small living room, Kemi couldn't stop thinking about the rude young woman. She decided to call David and tell him about the incident. David, something happened when I visited your office today, she began. What is it, Mama? He asked, concerned. Kemi explained how she had tripped and accidentally stepped on the young woman's foot, only for the woman to insult her without giving her a chance to explain. She said such hurtful things, David. I don't know how someone could be so rude to a stranger. David sighed. I'm so sorry, Mama. I have no idea who that could have been. Did you get her name? No, Kemi replied. I didn't think to ask. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. Please don't let it bother you, David said, trying to comfort her. Kemi let the matter go, but the memory lingered in her mind. A few weeks later, David posted a picture on social media to celebrate his girlfriend's birthday. In the photo, the young lady was smiling, and David had written a heartfelt caption describing her as the love of his life. When Kemi saw the post, her heart dropped. The girl in the picture was the same one who had insulted her at the office. She couldn't believe it. How could her son be in love with someone so disrespectful? Kemi immediately called David and asked to see him in person. When they met, she wasted no time. David, who is this girl in your post? Is she your girlfriend? David smiled. Yes, Mama. Her name is Joy. She's my fiancée. I'm going to marry her. Kemi's heart sank further. David, you can't marry her, she said firmly. David looked confused. Why not? What's wrong with her? She's the same girl who insulted me at your office that day, Kemi explained. She was rude and disrespectful. I won't allow you to marry someone like that. David frowned. Mama, maybe she was having a bad day. Joy is a good person. She's responsible, hardworking, and kind. You just need to get to know her. But Kemi was unconvinced. David, I know what I experienced. She insulted me without any reason. Someone who treats people like that doesn't deserve to be part of our family. David pleaded with her. Mama, I love her. She makes me happy. Please give her a chance. Kemi thought for a moment and then came up with an idea. Fine. If you want me to believe she's a good person, let's test her character. I'll pretend to be your maid. She doesn't know me, so this will show us how she truly treats people. David was hesitant. Mama, I don't know if that's a good idea. David, if you're so sure about her, then this shouldn't be a problem, Kemi said. It's the only way I'll be able to trust her. Reluctantly, David agreed. He wanted his mother to see the Joy he knew and loved. The following week, David proposed to Joy, and she happily said yes. Overwhelmed with excitement, she agreed to move in with him while they prepared for the wedding. David introduced Kemi to Joy as a maid he had hired to help with house chores. Joy didn't recognize her, and Kemi began her role in the house. She cleaned, cooked, and attended to Joy's needs, all the while observing her every move. Joy's treatment of Kemi started worse. What had started as subtle rudeness quickly escalated into open insult. Didn't I tell you to clean the windows properly? Joy snapped one afternoon, arms crossed as she stared at Kemi. Do you expect me to live in a house where I have to redo everything myself? Kemi stood quietly, holding her mop. I'm sorry, madam. I'll clean it again. Joy rolled her eyes. You better, honestly. I don't even know why David hired someone like you. You're slow, clumsy, and completely useless. If I were in charge, you'd be out of here. Kemi nodded, biting back her tears. She had to stay calm, reminding herself that this was all part of the plan. Still, it wasn't easy enduring Joy's constant insults and commands. Don't just stand there, get to work, Joy barked. Kemi hurried off to redo the windows, her heart heavy. Joy didn't need a reason to be rude. She seemed to enjoy looking down on her. One morning, Kemi accidentally spilled water on the kitchen floor while mopping. Joy walked in, saw the mess, and snapped. "What's wrong with you? Are you that careless? Clean it up, now." Kemi apologized and quickly wiped the floor, but the incident stayed with her. Joy's tone was harsh, and her patience seemed non-existent. One evening, Kemi prepared a special dish that David had requested. She worked hard to ensure everything was perfect, hoping that the meal would go smoothly. But as soon as Joy tasted the food, she wrinkled her nose. "What is this?" she demanded. "It's Utsi soup, madam. David asked for it," Kemi replied softly. Joy pushed her plate away. "It's disgusting. Did you forget how to cook? I can't believe David eats this garbage." When David arrived home and saw the untouched food, he asked, "Joy, why aren't you eating? Mama made this for us." Joy sighed dramatically. "Because it's terrible, David. Honestly, I don't understand why you keep her around. She's not even good at her job." David glanced at his mother, who remained silent, then looked back at Joy. "Maybe she's just having a bad day. She's trying her best." "Well, her best isn't good enough," Joy replied, her tone sharp. As the weeks went on, Joy's true colors became even clearer. She criticized Kemi at every turn, finding fault with everything she did. One day, she even refused to let Kemi sit in the living room, saying, "Maids shouldn't be lounging where guests might see them. Go sit in the kitchen if you're tired." Kemi took all the insults in stride, knowing that she needed to see this through. She was determined to show David the kind of person Joy really was. Finally, the day came when Kemi decided enough was enough. David came home to find his mother sitting in the kitchen, visibly upset. "David," she began, "I think it's time to end this charade." David sighed, already knowing what was coming. "Mama, what happened?" Kemi explained everything. The insults, the rudeness, the way Joy treated her like she was nothing more than a nuisance. "This is not the kind of woman you should marry," she said firmly. "She doesn't respect people, and she doesn't have a kind heart." David listened silently, his expression growing darker with each word. He couldn't ignore the evidence any longer. That evening, David sat Joy down for a serious conversation. "Joy," he began, "there's something you need to know. The woman you've been treating like a maid isn't a maid. She's my mother." Joy's face went pale. "What?" "Yes," David continued. "We've been testing you to see how you would treat someone you thought was beneath you, and you failed miserably." Joy stammered. "David, I didn't mean—" "No," David interrupted. "You meant every word. You insulted my mother, disrespected her, and treated her like she was nothing. I can't marry someone like that." Tears filled Joy's eyes. "David, please. I can change." But David shook his head. "It's too late. I need someone who will treat my family with kindness and respect, not someone who looks down on others. This relationship is over." Joy left the house that night, and David felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak. He had truly loved her, but he couldn't ignore her flaws. A few months later, David met another woman named Anita. She was warm, kind, and humble. Everything Joy was not. After they dated for a while, David decided to introduce her to Kemi. Kemi was cautious at first, but Anita's behavior quickly won her over. Anita treated Kemi with genuine respect and care, even thinking she was just a maid. One day, Anita saw Kemi struggling to carry a heavy basket of laundry. "Ma, you shouldn't be doing this at your age," Anita said gently. "Let me help you." "Oh, it's nothing, madam," Kemi replied. Anita shook her head. "Nonsense. You've worked hard enough. Why don't we hire someone younger to help with the chores? You deserve to rest." Kemi was deeply moved by Anita's kindness. Over the next few weeks, Anita continued to treat her with compassion, always offering to help and never speaking down to her. When David proposed to Anita, Kemi suggested the same test they had used with Joy. David was hesitant, but Anita passed with flying colors. She treated Kemi like family, even going out of her way to buy her small gifts and check on her well-being. One evening, after a family dinner, Kemi decided it was time to reveal the truth. "Anita," she said, "there's something you should know." "What is it, Ma?" Anita asked. "I'm not a maid," Kemi said with a smile. "I'm David's mother." Anita gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "What? Oh my goodness!" David laughed. "Yes, Mama wanted to see how you would treat her without knowing who she really was. And you've proven yourself to be an amazing woman." Anita's eyes filled with tears. "Ma, I'm so sorry if I ever said or did anything wrong." "You did nothing wrong," Kemi assured her. "In fact, you've shown me that you're exactly the kind of woman I want for my son. Welcome to the family." Anita and David got married in a beautiful ceremony, and their love story became an inspiration to everyone who knew them. Kemi couldn't have been happier, knowing that her son had found a kind, loving partner. And so they lived happily ever after, their family stronger than ever.